Thank you, Lindsay. Hi, everyone. My name is Alexandra Christou. I am the HR generalist at Spot Hero. Today, I'm really excited to talk to you about how to collect your company's demographic data. I know a lot of you may be in a smaller stage of your company where you might not necessarily have to report it, but I'm here to tell you why it's a good idea to start collecting it now, and then how to collect it and what you can do once you have that data. So you can go to the next slide, please. Just really quickly, so Chicago Blend, when Lindsay first introduced me to this data, I was really excited because for years I had been looking for a solution of how to compare ourselves to companies that were like us. Because while those giant tech companies had released their information online, it was really hard to compare Spot Hero, which was such a small company, to one of those global companies with employees in every country that had thousands of people. It just didn't make sense. So I definitely encourage you all to use Chicago Blend's data to benchmark your own companies against. Next slide, please. So why start now? The sooner you start, the better. Obviously, it will reduce the administrative burden when you do have to report your EEO-1 data. Just as a reminder, companies that are either 100 employees or more, or they have 50 employees and a government contract over $50,000, do have to report this data to the government every year. But if you're under that size, it's still a good idea to collect this data for a few different reasons. One, it establishes a culture that values diversity. So by signaling to your employees that you are collecting this data and actively looking at it and figuring out ways to improve it, it shows them that this is something that is built into the foundation of your company and that you're going to continue to commit to improving. Next, employees value transparency. So even potential companies, potential employees do ask about this during the interview process. And like was mentioned earlier, transparency is great. Even if you don't have, the stats of where you hope you would be, it's important to actively talk about these things. Next slide, please. So how to get started. Make it a priority to analyze and collect this data. As was mentioned before, it's really important to use it as a key metric that you're tracking. You're tracking so many other things. This is one that should be part of that. Have one person own this as well, whether it's someone on your people team or your legal team. Making sure that one person's responsible for this ensures that it doesn't fall through the cracks. So if you have employees who you don't know the demographic data for, send out a self-identification form to your existing employees. Please note this is obviously an optional form. They don't have to submit it. And then integrate this data collection into your onboarding. It's a really great way to collect this information up front. So new hires, they're filling out so many forms. This is just another one, and that's an easy way to get the information as well. So once you have that information, record it into your HRIS. I would highly encourage you to invest in a really good tool that lets you pull reports from your information, because as you grow, the things that you care about are going to change. So the way you look at, say, your departments or your levels, they're going to change. So you're going to want to be able to manipulate that data. And then finally, do an initial report. This was mentioned earlier as well. Just get a snapshot of where you're at today. It might not be where you want to be, but if you know your baseline, then you can figure out tactics to move forward and get to where you want to be. Next slide, please. So what to do with the data once you have it? You have so much information already right at your fingertips. It's so important to get those key insights for it. So obviously, when you are of a certain size, make sure you are filing the EEO-1 reports. But besides that, use it to analyze your current workforce to identify areas where diversity lacks. So whether that's, oh, we actually have no women in this department, or this group is very homogenous. This data can tell you that, and it's a really good way to present it to others in the company when making a case to improve it. Then build it into your recruiting strategy. So whenever we open a new role, we pull the data from that team and say, okay, well, this team is actually all white males. It would be really important to hire someone else into this team from a different demographic. And then also perform periodic pay equity audits. So this is so important to do, especially as you're a small company and grow. You want to make sure that you are just making sure that everything is equal across the board and there aren't any issues and everyone's getting paid equitably. That way you avoid any potential liabilities in the future. Next slide, please. And finally, other things to consider. So make sure you meet those filing deadlines when you need to. Think about expanding beyond the EEO categories. There are so many out there beyond just race, ethnicity, and gender. Think about sexual orientation, disability, even if people are parents. There are so many different ways that people can be diverse and that you can capture that data. And then once you have it, consider employee resource groups. Maybe there's a group of women in engineering that you could really foster a good community within that department. Make sure you use Chicago Blends data to benchmark your own to see where you fall against similar companies. Also remember that the employee is always the first source of truth. So if they say they are of a certain race and you thought otherwise, absolutely stick with what they told you they are. And then finally, this information is highly sensitive. So just make sure that any information that's published can never be tied back to an individual because they are trusting you with their private information. So next slide, please. That is the end of my presentation. I thank you all for listening. I'm happy to answer any questions if they've come up. Also happy to connect offline if people have other questions about what we've done at Spot Hero.
Alexandra, that was amazing. And I think you covered so many practical and tactical tips for us to implement in our own organizations and, for SBCs, the organizations that we're helping along the way. So I really appreciate it. It looks like you have your email up there. So anyone who has other questions, please feel free to reach out.